My parents didn't lower their voices when they said it. The greatest gift for your brother's wedding is you vanishing from this family forever. They said it plainly, at the same dining table where I had spent months planning every detail of my brother's perfect day. The same table where I stayed up late with open notebooks, vendor contracts, color swatches, and timelines spread out like proof that I mattered. My brother didn't defend me. My mother didn't even blink. My father folded his napkin carefully, as if the conversation had reached a polite ending. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I stood up, pushed my chair back, and walked out into the night air. Something inside me snapped free, not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly, like a rope finely cut. Before I tell you how everything fell apart, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and hit subscribe so we can meet here every day for stories like this. My name is Luna Hart, and for most of my life I believed loyalty was the same thing as love. In our house in Erie, that belief kept me busy fixing problems no one acknowledged, filling gaps no one thanked me for, and carrying weight my family pretended didn't exist. From the outside, we looked stable. A small family grocery store, a neat home, a son who became a lawyer, and a daughter who helped out. But inside, everything leaned toward my brother, Dorian. My mother, Mara, had a way of praising him that filled the room. She glowed when he talked about cases he barely won, bragged about hours he exaggerated, and celebrated every small achievement like a national victory. My father, Colin, followed her lead quietly, content to let Dorian dominate every conversation. I learned early that shrinking myself kept the peace. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Years before the wedding disaster, I was offered a marketing contract worth $40,000. It would have launched my career and finally pushed me toward the independence I secretly craved. But that same month, our family store began to sink. Bills piled up, shelves emptied. Fear crept into my parents' voices. I canceled the contract the same day my mother called crying. I worked nights designing flyers, recording radio ads, managing social media, and negotiating with vendors for more time. I doubled foot traffic in weeks. I stabilized the store. When the panic finally left my parents' faces, I truly believed they would finally see me. Instead, at the family meeting, my mother clasped her hands like she was announcing royalty. "We've decided Dorian should take over the store," she said. "He has the head for leadership." My father nodded without looking at me. Dorian hadn't lifted a finger. He barely showed up. And yet, he was handed the keys, the praise, the future. Something inside me shifted. Not enough to break, but enough to crack. That crack widened when the wedding planning began. They didn't ask if I had time. They didn't ask what it would cost. They simply handed me responsibility, deadlines, and silence whenever I did something right. The deeper I sank into planning, the more I realized I wasn't organizing a celebration. I was managing entitlement dressed up as family tradition. I stretched my freelance schedule thin, squeezed client calls between venue tours, and poured $10,000 from my savings into deposits. Every time I mentioned a budget, my mother reacted like I'd insulted the family name. One afternoon, I showed them the invitation draft I'd spent hours perfecting. My mother barely glanced at it before pointing out a tiny spacing error. "Careless," she muttered, tossing it back. Dorian smirked. "Typical Luna." My father didn't even look up from the television. I swallowed the sting and kept going, adjusting timelines, renegotiating contracts, finding cheaper alternatives to Dorian's ever-growing list of demands. Luxury band, imported flowers, specialty champagne. Every boundary I tried to set was met with an eye roll or a reminder. "This is his only wedding, Luna." At night, exhaustion settled into my bones, but hope kept whispering the same lie. Maybe if I do enough, maybe this time they'll finally see me. The exhaustion started showing in places I couldn't hide anymore. My hands shook slightly when I held my phone. My thoughts lagged like they were always a step behind whatever crisis was happening next. Still, I told myself it was temporary. Just get through the wedding, just survive this last stretch. Most nights, I met Mason at a small coffee shop downtown, the kind with scratch tables and soft lighting that made everything feel less sharp. He watched me sink into the chair across from him, my shoulders slumped, my eyes hollow. "You look like you're disappearing," he said gently. "I just need to get through this wedding," I told him. "After that, things will calm down. Maybe then they'll finally see everything I've done." He didn't argue right away. He stirred his coffee, then looked up at me. "You're building a house in a place that keeps burning it down," he said. "And every time it catches fire, you blame yourself for not using better bricks." His words followed me home that night, echoing in the quiet of my room. But habit is powerful. Hope can be louder than truth when you've been trained to earn love. The real breaking point came a week before the wedding at the menu tasting. I had chosen dishes carefully. Simple, elegant, affordable. Food that tasted good without destroying the budget. Roasted chicken, seasonal salads, clean flavors that felt warm and inviting. Dorian took one bite, then pushed the plate away. "This is bland," he said flatly. "We need lobster. And real champagne, not whatever this is." My mother nodded instantly. "He's right. This doesn't feel special." I reminded them that I had already paid the deposits, that upgrades would triple the cost, that my savings were nearly gone. Dorian leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Stop cutting corners, Luna. Make it happen." Something inside me shifted, not yet breaking but straining. The next day, Dorian posted in a local community group, "My sister is ruining our wedding with her laziness and cheap decisions." The comments flooded in. Neighbors I'd helped for years. People whose businesses I'd promoted, whose flyers I'd designed, whose crises I'd quietly fixed. They called me selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. That was when the quiet embers inside me turned into heat. Not rage yet, just a steady warmth spreading through my chest, alert and awake. The night everything finally cracked wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Dinner sat untouched on the table. My mother had made her usual roasted chicken, the meal reserved for serious family conversations. Dorian scrolled through his phone. Elise twisted her napkin in her hands. My father sipped his wine like he wanted to disappear into the glass. I opened my planner, hoping, stupidly, that we could align expectations. That I could explain calmly what I had already paid and what. Simply wasn't possible. Dorian didn't even look up. "We need upgrades," he said. "Lobster. Better champagne. And book that photographer from Pittsburgh. The one Elise likes." I closed the planner slowly. "There's no money left," I said. "I've already paid the deposits. The photographer alone costs more than everything we've booked combined." Dorian scoffed. "You're always so dramatic. Just figure it out." My mother set her fork down sharply. "He's right, Luna. Why are you making this difficult?" My heart started pounding, loud in my ears. "I've spent $10,000 of my own savings on this wedding," I said. "I'm out of money. I'm out of options." For the first time that night, my father looked up, only to shake his head. "This is your brother's once-in-a-lifetime day," he said. "Don't ruin it. Ruin it." The word hit harder than any insult before it. I looked at each of them, searching for gratitude, for recognition, for anything that said I mattered. There was nothing, just irritation that I couldn't give more. "I can't give you what you re-asking for," I said quietly. That was when my mother leaned forward, her voice low and sharp enough to cut. "The greatest gift for your brother's wedding," she said, "is you vanishing from this family forever." Something inside me went completely still, not broken, not shattered, just done. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and walked away. The night air hit my face like a cold, honest truth. I went straight to my room, closed the door, and stood there for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of my family still sitting at the table without me. No one followed, no one knocked. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I pulled out a suitcase and began packing slowly, deliberately. Clothes first, then toiletries, then documents, passport, birth certificate, everything. It proved I existed outside of that house. I didn't take much, only what was mine. When I picked up my keys and walked to the door, my hands didn't shake. When the lock clicked behind me, it sounded final, like the end of a sentence that had been running on for years. I sat in my car for a long time with the engine off, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. They were steady, steadier than they had ever been inside that house. By morning, clarity arrived quietly, not as anger but as a list. First, I called the caterer. "I need to cancel all services for the Hart grant wedding," I said. There were penalties. I accepted them. Refund whatever could be refunded. Release the date. Next, the florist. She recognized my voice immediately. "I'm sorry," I told her. "Something's changed." She softened, canceled the order, and returned part of the deposit. The band had already cashed my check, but banks have processes and I filed a dispute before lunch. By mid-afternoon, I had recovered nearly all $10,000, not by revenge, not by sabotage, simply by unraveling everything I had personally stitched together. My phone buzzed constantly. My mother, my father, Elise. Finally, Dorian. I didn't answer, not to punish them, but because silence was the first boundary I had ever allowed myself. That evening, I stood in the center of my small studio apartment, the one I'd barely lived in because I was always busy living for everyone else. The walls were bare. Laundry unfolded. Notes scattered across my desk. For the first time, the mess belonged only to me. The next morning was the wedding day. I didn't drive past the venue. I didn't sit nearby and watch. I opened my window, made a cup of tea, and let my absence do the talking. The chaos found me anyway. Voicemails stacked up quickly. "The flowers aren't here," my mother snapped. "The band isn't coming," my father said, breathless. "What did you do?" Dorian's message came last. "You ruined everything. Fix this." I almost laughed. Guests arrived to an empty venue. No music, no food, no flowers. Confusion turned into whispers. Whispers into judgment. The wedding dissolved in real time, not because I destroyed it, but because it had been built on my silence. I turned off my phone. 2 weeks later, I moved to Asheville with 2 suitcases and no apologies. Life there grew slowly, quietly. I found work. I found peace. I found myself. Back in Erie, everything I had once held together collapsed. The store failed. My parents sold the house. Elise left Dorian, returning the ring with a short note. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. One letter arrived from my mother. It wasn't an apology, it was a pull. I wrote back kindly, briefly, and final. Healing isn't returning. Leaving wasn't the punishment they imagined. It was the beginning of a life that finally belonged to me. I don't tell this story because I hate my family. I tell it because for a long time I hated myself for staying. For believing that love had to be earned through exhaustion, sacrifice, and silence. For thinking that being useful was the same thing as being valued. Leaving didn't make me brave overnight. It didn't suddenly turn me into someone fearless or unbreakable. It just gave me space. Space to hear my own thoughts without them being drowned out by expectations. Space to breathe without apologizing. Space to realize that peace feels unfamiliar only when chaos has been your normal. For a long time after I left, I waited for the guilt to crush me. I expected regret to show up in the quiet moments, to whisper that I'd done something unforgivable. But it never did. What came instead was relief, and then clarity, and then a strange, gentle grief, not for the family I lost, but for the version of myself who believed she had to disappear to be loved. I didn't win. They didn't lose. Life just moved forward, as it always does, without stopping to reward or punish anyone. The wedding didn't collapse because I was cruel. It collapsed because it was built on entitlement and unpaid emotional labor. The store didn't fail because I left. It failed because one person cannot carry what many refuse to hold. And I learned something important in the aftermath. You are not responsible for saving people who are comfortable watching you drown. Today, my life is quieter. Smaller, maybe, in the ways people like to measure success. But it's honest. My mornings belong to me. My energy goes where it's respected. I no longer explain my boundaries to people who benefit from me having none. I still believe in love. I just don't confuse it with obligation anymore. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself in it, the fixer, the peacekeeper, the one who's always expected to bend, I want you to hear this clearly. Choosing yourself is not abandonment. Walking away is not cruelty. And disappearing from a place that only sees your usefulness is not selfish. It's survival. Some families teach you how to belong. Others teach you when to leave. And sometimes the greatest gift isn't what you give to others, but the life you finally give back to yourself. If this story resonated with you, share it in the comments. You're not alone here, and if you want more stories like this, stories about boundaries, healing, and choosing peace, subscribe. And I'll meet you again right here.